Very good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. You will begin the session shortly, sir.
Yeah, okay, sir.
Sir, Rangesh sir, am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir, it's clearly audible, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. So thank you for no coming and giving us a lecture despite these very short notice.
Yes, sir.
And,
Yes, sir. Thank you for the
really thank you
opportunity,
so much.
sir.
Yes. Sir, all the students who are here, they are PG students, sir. So அதனால வந்து we can even go a little bit technical also. கொஞ்சம் advanced கூட போலாம், ஒன்றும் problem இல்லை. They are
Okay.
all PG students from the Department of Environmental Law and Legal Order.
Okay,
So
sir.
I'm
Okay.
just letting you know. So you கொஞ்சம் நீங்க டெக்னிக்கலா கொஞ்சம் அட்வான்ஸ்டா போற மாதிரி இருந்தாலும் no issues, sir.
Yeah.
And
Okay, sir. Fine.
students will always know if you want, you can also interact with the students. They're also will be having a good opportunity to speak with you. And we'll start in a couple of 5 more minutes, sir. Correct,
Sure,
ஒரு
sir.
11 o'clock போல start பண்ணிடலாம்.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Fine.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Next, start.
A very warm welcome to all for this distinguished event commemorating the significance of polar bear on International Polar Bear Day, which was on February 27th. We are honored to have you all here. I am Nandakumar from the Department of Environmental Law and Legal Orders, and I will be the master of the ceremony for this enlightening webinar organized by the Tamil Nadu Dr. Ambedkar Law University in association with ECO. I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank Honorable Vice-Chancellor of the Tamil Nadu Dr. Ambedkar Law University, Colonel Professor Dr. N. SANTHOSHKUMAR sir, whose leadership has been instrumental in creating a thriving academic environment. We are also joined by our esteemed Dean, Professor Dr. V. Balaji sir, our Registrar, Professor Dr. GOWRI RAMESH ma'am, and our PG Director, Professor Dr. Kumudratna ma'am, our Head of the Department, Environmental Law and Legal Orders, Professor Dr. Haritha Devi ma'am, along with our mentors, Assistant Professor Stanley sir and Kadiran sir. Now, let me briefly introduce you to the Eco Club, an initiative of the Department of Environmental and Legal Orders of the Tamil Nadu Dr. Ambedkar Law University. The Eco Club is dedicated to conserving nature and combating environmental degradation through education and research. It aims to promote ecocentric legislation and policies, enhance forest covers, rejuvenate water bodies, improve air quality, mitigate climate change, and protecting wildlife. The webinar is organized to address the critical issues of the polar bear conservation in the face of climate change. Polar bears, the magnificent creature of the Arctic. We are on the brink of extinctions due to the rapid melting of ice glaciers. Today, we have eminent speakers who will shed light on the legal framework, conservation efforts, and scientific marvels of the polar bears. They will provide valuable insights in protecting and preserving these iconic animals. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce to you all our esteemed speaker for today's event, Dr. K.Rangesh. Sir is the project scientist at the Ministry of Earth Science National Center for Coastal Research. He is currently leading the pivotal role in project at the Department of Marine and Coastal Studies, Madurai Commerce University. Sir brings with him a wealth of knowledge, having completed his PhD in zoology with gold medal for his best thesis in 2021, and holding qualifications in environmental studies and biotechnology. With over a decade of research experience, including 3 years of postdoctoral work, he has become a distinguished figure in the field of zoology, marine biology, and climate change. Saur's remarkable contribution to science are evident in his extensive publication records, boasting 15 research papers in SCI and WS journals, along with several books and book chapters. Beyond his scholarly pursuits, Saur is actively involved in numerous seminars, workshops, training programs, both as an organizer and as a presenter. He is also an active member of the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network and the Ocean Acidification Information Exchange, and serves as a reviewer for Springer Nature Journal. We are honored to have you, sir. Please share your insights on scientific marvels of polar bear, a story of science, survival, and love.
Yes,
The
sir.
floor is open to you, sir.
Thank you very much for your nice introduction about myself. So, very good morning to one and all gathering here. Respected Colonel Professor Santhoshkumar sir, Honorable Vice-Chancellor of Tamil Nadu Dr. Ambedkar Law University, respected Registrar ma'am, respected Dean sir, and convener of this program, and faculties Dr. Saktivel sir, Naveen sir, and all participants of this event. So, very good morning to you all, and I'm grateful to this opportunity given for me to take over the session. Shall I continue the session, sir, right now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can continue, sir.
Is my video and audio is very clear?
Yes, sir. It's clear, sir.
Okay, thank you. Sir, is my slide visible? Can I go ahead?
Yes, sir. Your slide is visible. You can.
Yeah. So, actually, yesterday is International Polar Bear Day 2025. You all know that. So there is, I'm very happy that taking the opportunity to present over the lecture to the LLM students of Tamil Nadu Dr. Ambedkar Law University, Chennai. So I'm asking and requesting the students to interact this session. So I'm going to the lecture each one by slide. If you want to ask any clarification, I'm going in deep in science. If you have any clarification, you can stop and ask me. So this will be going to a very good interactive sessions. So let me go to the topic: scientific morals of the polar bear, a story of science, survival, and law. Yes, actually, we are seeing and polar bears in the Arctic region. Why we are studying the polar region? So the global polar bears are reducing the numbers, diminishing 30% by 2050. It is predicted by Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So we are seeing the marvelous numbers of polar bear in the Arctic region. So the diminishing polar bear will lose to the Arctic regions. Especially, we can see that polar bear, there are only one species of polar bear is available in the Arctic region that is scientifically named as Ursus maritimus. So this is the polar regions entirely seen in Arctic region only. And you can see the brown bear that is called Kodak bear. It is not much in the Arctic. That polar bear is the endemic to Arctic region. And if you see the fact about the polar bear, it is a top predator in the Arctic region. That means it can kill, hunt the prey. Prey means the food animals of the polar bear. So Arctic polar bear is having much more significance, especially cultural significance to the indigenous Arctic communities. They are hunting, the people in the Arctic region is hunting the polar bear enormously. But today, the numbers are diminishing. Around 30,000 polar bears are approximately surveyed by the scientific peoples. But today, it's coming to diminishing. Let me explore the point of scientific use of diminishing the polar bear. So before going to that, we will see the distribution of polar bear. So there are two different kind of pole we see, Arctic and Antarctic regions, where we only find the endemic species of polar bear in the Arctic region, whereas Antarctic it is not found. So in Antarctic we can see penguin, but in Arctic we can't see. So there is much more significance. We will see one by one. And before going to that, the subpopulation. The subpopulation means the Arctic region contains 8 different countries coming from Canada, Denmark, Iceland, Finland, Norway, Sweden, Russia, and US. So in these regions, polar bears are available. You can see the numbers. Here I give the black dots in that image. That black dots size represents the number of size, population size. If big black enunciate the numbers is very high, the 2500 to 3000, it is available in Canada regions, and in other regions there will be very small range. And if you've seen in biological classification, polar bears actually 8 different varieties. We given 7 varieties of polar bear, like a sloth bear, sun bear, spectacled bear, and American black bear, Asiatic black bear, and brown bear. And polar bear is recently originated. That is modern polar bear. And if you've seen in the paintings of some 1500-year-old cave, we can see polar bear is the animal which living in that region. And this polar bear, as per the scientific conclusion, it's evidenced and diverged from 150,000 years ago. You imagine polar bears can originated from this number of years, but actually bear population emerged from millions of years, but the polar bear originated 150,000 years ago. If you see the complete mitochondrial genome, that is the DNA study of polar region, if we see these 8 bears, the modern polar bears is the top, that is called modernly originated. So we can find the fossil comparison of brown and polar bear skulls, and using the DNA fingerprinting, the evolution of history of polar bears we can see in this slide. And how it originated, the evolutionary process mechanism has some adaptations. We can just overlook about the adaptation. If you see the polar bears, it has 3 eyelids and a long neck and strong neck and muscles for swimming, and short tail, short ear, and skin is black. We find that skin is white, but I upcoming slides I will explain why it is not white. It is the skin is black, and large paws for attacking the prey animals, food animals, and 5 big claws on each paw. So these adaptations, when we compare in the habitat view, the polar bears all around the Arctic region in the northernmost areas of the land, they are mainly solitary animals. They are not crowded animals. They are solitary animals. Single animal can go for hunting and other purposes. They will travel long distance to hunt their prey for food, and they spend most of their lifespan on sea rather than land. And if you see the interesting facts about their ear and small tails, the polar bears have these adaptations for their warm condition to make it warm in the coldest Arctic region. So this is the idea about the adaptation. If you see the overall idea, you can see the snout. Snout is long snout, as like a dog and some animals, and their body structure is low surface volume ratio minimizes the heat loss. Based on heat loss reduction, it is or adapted in that Arctic region. Their claws, sharp claws, and feet, fat feet, soft, fat pads with rough texture keep the beer from slipping. So it can grip like holding of the ice region. So skin is black skin absorb heat of the sun, and the blubber, that fat thickening pad is called blubber. It's very thickening, and its hair, fur, dark skin, and fat layers, muscle layer. We'll see one by one about the adaptations. So first of all, fur and skin adaptation. White fur for camouflage, but not translucent. When you come to see the translucent, that is a transparent like hair. Say for example, this is not a true color of the polar bear. If you see in the Arctic region, the evening time or the midlight, so the color of the polar bear show yellow color, but in mid sun it's so very white color. What is the reason? That is called translucent camouflage. Based on the time, it can vary their color. That is called camouflage. So for hunting, it will camouflage like an Arctic ice. So two different layers of fur is helpful for prevent the heat loss in that polar bear animals. They can quickly overheat when they run. Okay, if they are running, the heat will be much more higher in the cold regions. So they are adapting that like that. That's the reason they have two layers of fur and a thick padding of fat. If you see the coldest region when it's swimming, the two layers of addition to two layers of fur, it has thick layer of fat that keeps the polar bear very warm. A polar bear's body fat can measure up to 11.4 centimeter. You can see the thickening of the fat. Their skin, if you peel it, you can see thickening of fat in that polar bear. So in the water, polar bears rely more on their fat than their fur. So fur is look like a wetsuit. So wetsuit in swimming pool we are wearing wetsuit. So like that fur is helpful, but for heat loss it can more rely on their thick padding of fat. So for seasonal changes, it will take as a help for their body condition. And fat and blubber, coming to fat and blubber, 10 around 10 centimeter thick fat layer. It is called blubber. It is for insulation purpose to avoid heat loss. So this kind of thick fat layer, which is very much helpful for polar bear to survive months without eating any prey. If you see the summer season, the polar ice will be melting. So the entire habitats means their living places will be smashed. So in that region, the polar bears are very much hungry. So it will go for hunting for long period by sea ice. It will go to the near shore. From the sea ice, it will go to the shore for hunting. So this flubber, until the time it's hungry, it is managed by this flubber. Yes. And this one of the fat blubber is helpful for photography. Even in the night vision, you can't capture the polar bear for video recording or images using the night vision camera, that is infrared camera. You can see the thermal image of a polar bear. Other animals you can see very good manner, but polar bear, the thermal cameras cannot detect the heat loss because that thermal cameras can detect the heat loss by a subject as infrared, but the bears keep warm due to a thick layer of blubber under the skin that leaving the outer layer to the almost same temperature as the snow around them. So the thermal camera, infrared camera cannot capture the polar bear. And you can see the other adaptation called pass. pass, specialized pass. So this pass have a specialized pass for getting around the Arctic region. They are huge, huge pass. Their measurement up to 30 centimeter, 1 feet. You imagine that 1 feet of pass, it can help for bears walk on the thin ice. For thin ice, it's look like a plate that walking through the ice by the help of paws. So the super paws are also designed for swimming. That plate-like structure, it can move around the sea in the polar Arctic region. And during that slip-proof treads, their walking style, when that it's going in the like slippery region, it can tread like a Spider-Man. It grips hold. It grips hold like a papilla. It can attach the eyes. It will tuft of fur between the toes also helpful to the warmth condition. If imagine if our hands, if we touch the ice, what will you feel? At least of 0 to 10 degree ice, you can feel that like murmuring effect. But the papillae grip has a fur, tuft of fur in that beer. It can help to warmth in the toes so that they can rigid in that polar region. And powerful claws, so the claws can help for taking predator for their food animal. So thick, curved and strong, each measured more than 5 centimeter claws. Imagine that this much claws look like a knife, can easily attack the prey and it can take as a feed. So these are the special adaptation for polar bear. Can you see the GIF animation of that strength? You can see that the strength of Arctic region is very much stone-like structure, but they using their jaw pressure, it's go and break the sea ice. You can imagine that stronger than a lion, 102, 1200 pressure, psi pressure, that incredible strength of polar bear. And you can see the size and weight. So the adult male normally weigh around 600 kg. So that female is less than that. And in Canada, it is estimated that 800 kg of polar bears you can see. And the scientists usually measure that their shoulder when all four legs, it can stand at least 3 to 5 feet. But if it is stand in like human in with the using the hind legs, it can tall as 10 feet. Imagine 10 feet. So one and a half man stack up together, and the height and the size weight is unimaginable. If you see in lively, it will break. Yes, and the swimming and diving abilities, how the polar bears can swim. It can swim up to 10 hours, and the distance at a stretch, it can go reach up to 100 kilometers, 62 miles continuously. So for food or when the sea ice loss happens, and it can dive up to 13.9 meter. It's highly recorded, but usual dives can go up to 5 meter depths. And the Arctic vision, we already see that the third eyelid can help filter UV light for their good night vision for the predation activity, the killing animals for food. It can use the night vision and also taking care of their cub, the baby polar bear. So it's called third layer called tapetum lucidium. This kind of reflective eye layer helps to very much strength to stimulate light sensitive cells in the retina second time, thereby improving night vision. And it can resist extreme cold conditions. You can see that blizzard like fog in the Arctic region, that polar bear can survive up to minus 50 degree. It's wonderful, amazing. So that polar bears have the black skin under the white fur. So this is the region. I already told that the black skin helps to uptake the sunlight. The heat can hold in that body. they can get the heat from that through that the black skin. So polar bears and their way, you can see the metabolism and food diet. You can see the largest land carnivore is a polar bear. It can weigh up to 800 kg. We already seen 3 meter tall. Their stomach hold up to 150 pounds. It's don't drink water and can smell prey within 1 kilometer. So 1 kilometer away the prey is available. It can smell and even under thick ice it can smell and find out the prey for food animal. So the you can check that black notes. It's black notes. It's cover with the paws during the prey animals coming. So the camouflage, they hide around that Arctic region, the snow region. So it will just cover the black nose. Then the prey animals unknowingly come together and it will hunt. The polar bear hunt the prey animal. So say for example, ringed seals, birded seals, walrus, and beluga whales. These are opportunistic feeders that can polar bears hunting. So we can see seal hunting. So there is an interesting fact called still hunting. Still means the polar bear is waiting for the prey catching. So under the ice, the subsurface region, the polar bears are waiting. So when the seals come out or near the breathing holes, the polar bears hunting in very much manner. So the waiting called still hunting. And other behaviors of polar bears we can see. So that is it's happy behavior, fighting behavior, and lazy behavior. You can see. And polar bear is a very good opportunistic feeder that scavenges on whale carcasses. The whales, biggest creature in the world, when the whale die in the unconditional situation, it's washed offshore. When polar bear finds that, they go and scavenging or feed on whale carcasses. So other kind of diet requirements we can see by the polar bear. It can take one seal at the time or 1.5 caribou at the time or 37 arctic char, that is like a salmon fish, or 74 snow geese. This is a bad day, especially in the Arctic region, or 216 snow goose its egg. So 216 egg for his diet. And or 3 million crowberries. This is a small fruit like structure in the Arctic region. These are small fruits. 300 million crowberries required for their diet. So if there is summer season, the ice will be melting, the less ice will be there. So less ice means few seals available. So the feeding will be based on shore based feeding. It will travels to the shore. But what is about the metabolism and fasting? So when the sea ice loss is there, it can survive months without eating during free ice season. But when it goes very far distance, it will fast. So there is an it has an unfortunate for fasting and it will reduce their weight. Using the fat blubber, it can take their metabolism. So we are taking glucose. We will convert excess glucose convert to fat. That is called glycogen. When we are fasting, our body is taking the glycogen as a food, glucose source. So like that, fasting is seen in that animal. And you can there is a research that daily energetic requirements of polar bears uh, and based on the temperature. If you see the temperature levels increasing, that the increasing temperature, the daily requirement amounts is very less. So like that, if you see the daily weight loss, you can find in the different seasonals in males and females, that will vary. The metabolism will be vary. And the Arctic polar bears can interact with the other Arctic animals like walrus, and they can fight with the walrus. Even when it's solitary of the walrus, it can hunt. When it is small size, when it's bigger size, it will not hunt. And for food resource, it can compete with the other creatures like Arctic foxes is there, wolf is there, Arctic wolf. They will compete for the common food resources. If both have same resource, it will fight with each other. If it is great, they will become a bestie. That is a friendship between the polar bear and the Arctic fox for scavenging together. And you can see these images will tell you. And about the reproduction and life cycle, the mating and cubs. So the mating, the sexual interaction before that, the males, several males is there. They will be fighting for one female. So after who dominates well, the female choose that male. Then it will have sex and for mating and getting cubs for pregnancy. So you can see the life cycle of the polar bears. So if you sub-adult become adult, it will go with the mating process with the female. And when the female got mating, it will go digging for den making. Den is a small like cave. That is a house for female polar bear. So that female polar bear, when it pregnants in the den, the fetus good developing. After that, cub is born. So the cub you can see emerging from the den. So after that, you can find there is a females laying the young one cubs. So if you find that there are different delaying process of dormancy state, that is called delaying implantation. When mating occurs in the spring season, that is April to March, so but their seasons, the fertilized egg of embryo is not implanted in the uterus, but until fall season is there, they can, the female has accumulated enough fat reserves to sustain herself and their cub, baby cub. So then only implantation triggers. So the it can dig the den like this structure in the picture, and up to three cubs during the pregnancy. Okay, this is a approximate rate by research, and after that it comes out the cubs. When it develops, it will come out from the dig. So and you can see the birth and mother cub bond. Cubs usually born in December to January month. When it is aged, the mother nurse will giving the caring, parental caring for 2 years. So 2 years it will give good parental cubs. And there are some survival challenges for young one baby cubs. So only 50% cubs survive for the in the first year. We cubs struggling on melting ice. Polar cubs face many challenges to survival, including climate change, oil spills, and chemical contamination. When there is an Arctic region, have several kind of pollution activities are happening. The oil and gas. Scavenging, drilling, and enormous. They are in economic aspect. They are taking the oil, petrol, etc. But that struggle to the cubs. So the it makes the survival challenges for the cubs. So mother usually stop their parental caring from 18 months to 30 months. So it's that gives the milk which has 33% of fat. So it has fat. So for the young one. So when the sea ice is loss is there in summer and in climate change situations, the mother is fast, and it will reduce the lactation process. Giving the milk to cub is very much declaring. And yes, yeah, I think Senthil Kumar, has asked a question. What conservation? Yes, I will come to the end of slide. I will clarify. There is a special slide on that. I will explain. On the climate change impact in Arctic. Yes, this Arctic sea ice extent is there. So this kind of normal phenomena is happening in the Arctic ice regions. So sea ice extent, you can see 10 power 6 kilometer unit. So this is a unit. You check that 1 million square kilometer. That kind of Arctic ice range will be depleted by 2015 as per Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So this climate change will affect the uh, polar ice condition. So it will lead to ice-free Arctic summers. So what will happen? You can see the average black dot lines and compared with the other lines, you can see that red color line it's going depleted. So red color line is 2011. When you compare that years and it will go down. So this process enunciate that climate change phenomena will greatly affect the polar bear's survival. And what effect on their diet? The less ice will make fewer seals. It will the polar bears opportunity for land-based food sources searching. So this is called apex predator of the Arctic. If the seal population is reducing, what will happen? The polar bears will get the population get diminished. So you can see there are some conservation strategies in that Arctic region. If you find the map between the two different years, that it's telling the arenas. So the Endangered Species Act are very much possible in that polar region, but there are some loopholes. Okay, we can see the 13% of ice reduction per decade. So this is the shrinking sea ice effect in that Arctic region. So we can see polar bear as a lot of the Arctics in Canada because it has 60 to 80 percentage of that population compared to the world. So several conservation organization is there. But when we study the about the population diminishes of polar bear, there is a domino effect. What is the domino effect? The seals which polar bears primarily prey upon. We know that seals are the primary food for polar bear. When the Arctic sea ice is reducing, there will no seals available. So the seals availability is not there. It will be hungry. It will be stay starvation. Starvation means fasting, so it will happen continuously. The food source will not be available. Then polar bear population diminishes. It will go die off. Okay, it is unimaginable. And finally, that seal population, if the polar population is reduces, seal population will increase later. If the seal population increase, the polar bears cannot control the seals. If the seal population is higher, when polar population is lower, the seals will more preying activities on fishes. It will consume more fishes. So the fish population in the Arctic diminishes. So it continues. When it continues, the human livelihood, the humans no availability of fishes. So this is the possible phenomena of domino effect. So the Arctic sea ice reduction is giving very much importance in this region. So there are different kind of conservation laws and treating that protects polar bears. We can see the CITES. CITES means Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. There are about their reports 400 to 500 polar bears are estimated to be internationally traded. Why it's been traded? There are some usefulness to economic people's livelihood. And if you see the IUCN red list, so the IUCN is the organization which tells which organism is going very threat. That population number diminishes, the entire species will be lost from the world. Hereafter, we can't see. So that IUCN is threatening. So using red listing, they are taking population census every year. You can see from 1982 to 1994 it's vulnerable, but in 1996 the population they noted in very large, so there is lower risk for conservation. And to 2015 it's again vulnerable. So this is IUCN's and sites very much possible work done, and there are different kind of treaty documents available. That is circumpolar action plan. All Arctic regions, the circumpolar action plan is helps to support that conservation of polar bear, and the polar bear specialist group PBSG reports and federal regulation are also mention about the polar bears conservations. So this 1973 is the we can see the first conservation agreement for polar bears. So this is an international treaty established in 1973. The partnership of the country is United States, Canada, Russia, Norway, and Denmark. And laws and treaties protecting polar bears, as per the treaties and the national agencies, what are the national conservation efforts? US has a special act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act. Under that, polar bears are conserved. In Canada, hunting restriction are there. Many scientific research are happening, and Russia protected territories, that regions they are protecting. So if you protect the region, it is a biosphere reserve region, the human cannot enter, or the restricted entries may possible by human. And in Norway, that hunting is permitted. And in Russia, in 1957 itself, the banning of hunting. And Greenland also hunting ban on mother bears and their cubs. So this is also an interesting facts. And other NGOs, non-governmental organization, are also doing some activities for conservation of polar bears. That wildlife, World Wildlife Fund, it's especially for all kind of wildlife organism. So this has special polar bear program, and polar bears international is a group. So polar bear international is doing conducting vital research and spearheading conservation actions. So and NRDC is there. It will provide helpful for supporting conservation of polar bear through legal action and policies. So you can see also Greenpeace is the NGO which can consistent advocate for polar bear conservation for pushing strong climate policies. We can see many other treaties are there. And if you see the International Polar Bear Organization, they are doing protected areas and reducing human bear intake. They are research on Arctic polar bears conservation. So what that hunt, how they go, where it activates in that. They're doing vital research for polar bear conservation in the Arctic region. And also we should responsible for the polar bear conservation. So even there are some kind of human versus polar bear against human effects on polar bear. They are hunting. You can see in that image. They are for yes. Can you see the zoom image, participants? Yes.
Yes, sir. It's clear.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So they are hunting, yes, but that illegal hunting is happening in the Arctic region, but it's recorded, documented, and after that, the judge fines with $80,000. So in the Nunavut regions, US. So what in our humans, we should aware about the safety of humans, but we should not hunt so much of polar bears. You can see that Norway's oil and gas expansion plans in the Arctic region is going on, but today the courtroom case involving impeding many laws. So we can save the polar bears as the population diminishes. So the polar bears will getting down if there is no conservation actions. So the in the Arctic region, you can find the polar bear safety tips. You can get away from the polar bears, but some people hunting so much. So what? How can we help? In our views, the polar bears are naturally affecting by many kind of emissions. So greenhouse emission is an example. So for the carbon, many much more increase in carbon if we not reducing or the business as usual scenario continues, the carbon footprint should not reduce. So we should reduce the carbon footprint. So for the many ways, the global climate change is going, and we should reduce the waste, recycling, empowerment, and apart from using gas, or we have to go green. So that is carbon footprint. It's enunciating and protecting polar bear cubs through many kind of strategies there. So through that, even after the natural phenomena, we can give effort for conservation of polar bears. And there are other kind of activities and pressures against the polar bears. So the anthropogenic human activities should be omitted. So the Polar International says, we people, how can we help? So you eco club people, um, I am appreciating yourself for conducting this kind of event. So you will be aware, and you will be at least tell 10 peoples like this kind of species extinction will happening in the Arctic region. So, if we people aware about this kind of disaster, we can aware to give awareness to many people, young people. So we can talk about climate change and the solutions. So in the 2016 Polar Bear Day, so that International Polar Bear International Organization take one solution. So I zoom it. 2% up, set air conditioner 2 degrees higher in the summer, and in winter season you can down 2 degrees lower. So this is called thermostat challenge. If you follow in your place, it will definitely help to reach to Arctic. So the people should aware, if our activities only you can switch off or switch on. This activity will help the polar mother and cub for the protection. So and also research enhancement. So the people should aware about the research on conservation strategies. There are many research we can found in the recent publications. So the satellite tags about evaluating the movement and behavior of polar bears, and a DNA chip kind of assessment studies for their diversity, and climate change, that temperature decreasing and warming increasing patterns is studied in research, and climate assessment of risk. These kind of studies will help to safeguard the polar. So these are my summary key points. We can find that polar bears, we can, in the polar ice reduction, the mother and the cub have no such protection. So if there are more sea loss due to global warming, so the mother and cubs is very much affected. If it is continuous, the polar bear becomes more fasting, and it will hunger, and it will lost its flabber fat. So what can you take the actions there? Yes, and our action should be very much necessary for conservation of polar bears. So, if the ice loss is continuous, when the species extinction is happen, so one time that polar bears feel, but tomorrow we people will fear about the species extinction. So now today it's asking, where did everybody go? So this is a saddened feeling of polar bear. It cannot feel, but in our perspective, we are humans, we should feel about their disasters event. So I'm very much thankful and give the conclusion. So in the climate change, overall, you can check the fact polar bears need sea ice to survive. And if you see the sustainable development goals, we can enhance the goals of UN SDG goals. So 12, 13, 14, 15, 17. They 13 say, for example, 13. the land below water and land above the animals conservation activities, and SDG 17 enunciate the partnership of the world countries. So say for example the eight countries, Russia, Canada, that Finland, Iceland, they have a arctic condition, but they are also should be global partnership for conservation of polar bears. Yes, and yes, you can also contribute to kind of polar bear international. So you can, your generosity can save at least polar bear moms and cubs. So yes, 2 days before in the polar days, I also contributed a little money to the polar bear organization. Yes, even what you can do, you can do. So thank you very much for your patience and yes.
Thank you very much, sir, for your insightful presentation on polar bears. The floor is open for questions. Sir, what is the impact of ocean acidification on polar life? Like bears, do you think is there is any direct impact on polar bears?
Sir, I appreciate your question. It's a very good question. We are working about the ocean acidification phenomena in that local region. But if I read the many research articles, that ocean acidification is supporting that kind of global warming. So that global warming is indirectly affects the ocean acidification, which is also going for melting sea ice. So that is indirect relationship I can see in that research paper. So ocean acidification, there is a different laws which is for protection for global warming cost to human and environment, but for polar regions it should be need to study more. Okay, there is few studies are there, I could go through it, but many studies should be possible to come.
Understood, sir. Understood, sir. So, where do you see the life of polar bears in next 20 to 30 years? Because there are many articles which suggest or which explicitly says about the melting of Arctic region and Antarctic regions. Do
Yes.
you think will they really bear those climate change effects, or will they become extinct?
Yes, sir. Actually, seeing that 2030 also the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change they predicted, but in 2015 the overall CA is lost would be 13%. So the decadal changes rate will be 13% of CA is lost. So this much it's predicted that polar bear population will be diminished in that 2050.
So, will they bear the impacts of climate change, or will they become extinct? What's your opinion as a marine biologist?
Yes, sir. As a marine biologist, the organism like polar bears can sustain the climate change in a, smaller way, but the you can see the evolutionary adaptation. So it can get the water temperature, pH, and salinity. There are many huge effects the water condition to the polar bear. So in ocean acidification view, it's definitely going to a big effect on the populations of polar bear.
Hello, sir. This
Yes,
is
sir.
Varun from Ambedkar. I have
Yes.
a very simple question. Whether the in situ or ex situ conservation of polar bears have been happened anywhere, or is this kind of conservation is very helpful for the declining population of polar bears?
Yes, definitely. It's a very good question, and actually, there are some strategies they are following. In situ conservation, ex situ conservation. The international treaty is should be recommend this kind of in situ conservation. Some person is trying to grow the polar bear in the home. but it's not now licensable. But the treaties should be recommending in the future. So this is also one kind of in situ conservation. But in situ conservation is possible. Right now that brown bear and polar bear is combinedly um, copulated and going for the hybrid. So they are studying the gene breedings. So the genetic breeds will show that stronger when brown bear and the Arctic polar bear, when it hybrids, that kind of strong is there. But this is a study, this is experiments. There is a in situ strategy is going, but many studies they are conducting to safeguard the Arctic polar region.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have another doubt. How
Yes.
these treaties or convention are effective in controlling the declining population of polar bears?
Yes, yes, yes. Actually, the eight countries doing many kind of treaties, but in some countries they will not cooperate. So they allow for the socio-economic and cultural aspect. Many polar bears are hunted. So I think numbers may be varying, but polar bear hunting some government is allowing for their cultural aspect. If it is not that culture, uh, they know it's they can't control in fullest possible. But the treaty is allowing them for sustainable usage of that polar bear for cultural and socio-economic and livelihood activities. Yes,
Thank you so much.
yes,
Good morning, sir. Am I audible?
yes, audible, Madhimaran.
Yes, sir. So my question is, there are many other factors like poaching is also evident in polar bears. Do you think that can also be a factor that could be influencing on the cause of disappearing of polar bears in a particular region?
Yes, 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 very much. It's impactful. So poaching should be avoided. That is also mentioned by in one of the treaties I read. So poaching should be avoidable. Okay, but there is no proper reports and documents is available. But if it is do for poaching, they are definitely doing some punishments. So it should be avoided. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Marimaran. Any other questions from students? You are very good interactive manner you are asking. Thank you very much for your interactions. So Sendil Kumar asks, polar bear become completely extinct. What action plan should we adopt to address the yes should be addressed polar bears completely extinct? Yeah, we are doing many activities against the polar bear for complete extinction. So the action plan, so that SDG goal 17 is for partnership for these countries, Arctic countries. These eight countries are doing some treaties and action plans. So there are a list of protocols they are already having, but the possibility of implementing has some problems like saving the culture, safeguarding the human when polar bear attacks. So it is possible the action plans are many is available to safeguard that also includes the conservation strategies in situ ex situ. So as the human being, we will not surely lost the polar bears. We should safeguard. So, so one of the key strategies is the conservation. When we go for um, very good implementation, that is the today's our need of time. Thank you. Thank you, Senthil Kumar.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful interaction between the science, survival, and law has
Thank
been
you, sir.
truly fascinating. Your presence has enriched our understanding and appreciation of this vital subject. We are truly grateful for your time and valuable contributions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Our next Next eminent speaker for our webinar is Dr. P. Satyavel, Associate Professor and Director of BCom LLB Honors, Department of International Law and Organization from Tamil Nadu Dr. Ambedkar Law University. So we'll discuss on the legal protection of polar region and polar bears. The floor is open to you, sir.
Thank you. I think the presentation is visible to you, isn't it?
Yes, sir. It's visible.
So let's start the presentation. I'll just yeah. Do you see the second page? Yeah, very good.
Yes, sir.
Fine. I think thanks for inviting me. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Haritha ma'am. Good morning, Naveen, and all the faculty members here. Students, dear students. So it's a kind of pleasure to me that you've just thought of me on this day. So now let's get into the business. First, I must thank Rangesh sir for providing a brief or an extensive overview about the legal measures that are relating to polar bear. So I thought I can start from that point directly and getting into the business. So as students of environmental law and postgraduate students who are mostly present here, you must be aware that environmental legal regime, especially the international legal regime, has got both multilateral as well as international conventions. There are obviously certain bilateral agreements also, but for in the present case, it is a regional arrangement. It is a regional arrangement in the sense the polar region, the circumpolar polar region consists of around 5 countries, and all the 5 countries are members to the agreement on the conservation of polar bears. So this convention, this legal agreement came into force after in 1976. I guess the agreement was in 1973, came into force in 1973 subsequently. But there are certain interesting points that led to this agreement. The interesting points are it was initially the IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, has provided as kind of made a survey that the polar bears are in kind of threat of extinction. The threat of extinction was basically due to the over hunting. So historically, the primary problem with the conservation of natural resources or the biodiversity was hunting. At least from 1970s to 1990s, that was the huge issue. Now we'll discuss later the other issues. So then they got 1973. They made this agreement. This is both the framework convention as well as the convention that envisages nation states to take action plans at the national level. So here another point I just wanted to give you that like human rights legislation, environmental agreements, international agreements also require states to act at their national sphere. So you have an international agreement which mandates states to cooperate amongst themselves. So in that sense, this is a very interesting, I mean, it's a model like any other international agreement. This also requires states to act upon their international commitments. This is almost applicable across all the international legislation relating to environment or human rights, particularly this one also. Which makes environmental law or human rights is an interesting subject, unique subject, because most of the mandates that you get from environmental law, international law, are to be implemented by national governments by their own legislation.
So a student of environmental law is expected to be thorough both in international environmental law as well as municipal environmental law. And there are two other extensions that an environmental law student is supposed to do. One is how the scientific basis for whatever environmental discussions we take up, like the extensive narrative given by Rangesh sir. So that we must know it. That is one thing. And there is one more thing, that is the end of the chain is how these laws are being implemented. Are they really functioning in the down? And what is the interest of stakeholders in all these aspects? And what do we really mean protection? Is it really helping people who are interested in the subject matter, who are in the case of polar bear, it is very simple. See, you are protecting polar bears from hunting. The primary hunters or the indigenous people were the oldest, they were the hunters, traditional hunters. Now if you prohibit hunting as a whole, what is the substitution or the alternative arrangement that you made towards these indigenous populations? So in every conservation effort, you are supposed to explain to the people like how it affects or impacts on the indigenous populations and environment and the general development and so on and so forth. So that also we'll try to note in this case, right? So this agreement was signed by Canada, Denmark, Norway, Russia, and the United States, who are the countries, parties to the. So it provides a framework for the coordinated national measures to protect polar bears and their habitats. I told you this. And what are the salient provisions of it? Regulation of hunting. The agreement restricts hunting to specific purposes such as scientific research or traditional subsistence hunting by local people. And it prohibits hunting from aircrafts and large vessels, which are particularly efficient and detrimental methods in the sense it can destroy. If you are doing from aircraft and large vessel, it can kill or unintended targets also. So that is why it has been regulated. And also it protects habitat protection. Measures to protect polar bear ecosystem with particular attention to denning, feeding, and migration areas. And research and monitoring. Obviously, like any other international convention, research, monitoring, information collection, all are there. And it also places restrictions on trade of polar bear products. So what are the implementing mechanisms? So the agreement expects states to protect, and there are regular meetings to provide a forum for exchanges. And now the SAR has mentioned about circumpolar protection plan that has been from 2013. So there are continuous review of the agreement or the efforts. That is one of the purposes. And as I mentioned, polar bear specialist groups also provide scientific advice to the range states. Range states are states which are parties to the agreement, and wherever polar bear is ranging, so it's moving. So across the convention, across the agreement, use the term range states. That is wherever polar bear goes. This is all one more. This convention is another model for biodiversity protection at the regional level. So when you read Convention on Biological Diversity, which is a general international agreement. There should be some species to it, right? So species in the sense there should be some sort of bilateral arrangement if a species moves from one state to another, especially migratory mammals or migratory animals that move through land. Because for animals which fly, birds, we have got another. We may have other mechanisms, but for migratory birds, but for species that move through land or ocean, we need separate mechanism. So it provides an international model for us. And apart from this, we have a very general international protection, that is Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of CITES. Although CITES doesn't prohibit it, as they say, we have this agreement which would protect, right? and the UN Convention on Law of the Sea, because Arctic waters are supposed to be covered under this one, and Convention on Biological Diversity. So these are the general conventions that we see, and also so you have uh, this CBNJ also, protection of biological diversity beyond natural, otherwise called as High Seas Convention. But the applicability of the High Seas Convention as to polar bears, I am just doubtful, because are they moving beyond it? So now we'll come to the national laws, because that is a mandate of the convention. So Marine Mammal Protection Act is in US, and there is an Endangered Species Act. Similarly, you will find out in other countries also, like Canada. Canada provides a kind of interesting case study, because Canada has got both federal as well as state laws, provincial laws to protect the environment. See, it applies in US or in every other federal country, US, Russia, or Canada, or even like countries like India. But you see, most of the legislation, although environment is in the concurrent list, most of the legislation you see relating to environment or federal legislation. India isn't it union legislation? So therefore, maybe Canada has gotten a very effective mechanism for protecting natural, both federal as well as state laws to protect natural resources. Canada also provides an interesting case study in the case of protecting the indigenous populations, having agreements with them in terms of protecting the wildlife or other species, so biodiversity. So the agreements between the native populations or the provinces or native countries, they call it as, recognizing the right of self-determination. There are rights guaranteed to these populations. So whenever they do some projects, environmental impact, apart from environmental impact assessment, getting permission from these populations also being vital. So in that sense, Canada provides an important case study. So Canada's provinces, as well as the groups of indigenous communities and the territories, have got certain rights as to under this under the protection regime of polar bears. So they also protect. And in Russia, it has got many federal laws that protect polar bears, including the conservation of polar bears and the Habitat Act. Now, hunting is generally prohibited, but with limited exceptions. So, and Norway, as you know, Norway is kind of providing a ground for researchers to work from its stations like Svalbard. So there is a Polar Bear Act which strictly regulates human activity in polar bear habitats, particularly in the Svalbard archipelago. And hunting is generally prohibited, and you know why it is. And Greenlandic laws, that is the Denmark territory. Greenland has its own laws and regulations for wildlife management. Hunting is regulated, and there are certain specific protections for polar bear denning areas also. So here I haven't mentioned about one important development. Can you just mention it, message it? I'll continue. That's my PowerPoint. I don't have anything more than this, but I have one important issue to be discussed. What is that? Yeah, have any guess? No, I'm expecting some questions. Just switch on the mic and talk, or yes, Nandakumar, great. So what is there in the climate change regime? Because the primary threat which they envisaged in 1972 was hunting. So the whole agreement was planned or envisaged or thought in line of hunting and only hunting related aspects. Now, climate change changes the whole range of biodiversity, the species habitats being affected, especially, and as you know, polar regions are first affected by climate change. As such, polar bears to be affected first amongst all the other species. Therefore, what do we have in climate change regime? We do not have anything in the climate change regime specifically protecting the polar bear. So what we have, I mean, for that matter, I don't think just polar bear isn't mentioned. Climate change regime doesn't specify protection of any other species except human beings, of course. I don't think any other species or any other dimension of species protection is being mentioned in the climate change regime. So therefore, we also see that there is no specific protection available in the climate change regime for conserving the polar bear. But we see that there are general provisions in terms of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, temperature, reducing the temperature rise, as mentioned by Rangesh, switch off the ACs, or switch off the ACs, or reduce or increase the temperature to 26 or something like that. So that is a kind of plan that we have got. Unfortunately, we haven't gone into a climate change regime which specifically protects. In fact, we are not, even if for the human population, we have got specific provisions for countries like small island states in the climate change regime. So we don't have any very specific mechanism for protecting the polar bears, or for that matter, any other species within the climate change regime. That is so unfortunate, because it is contemporary. No longer polar bears are threatened by hunting. Hunting is there, but that threat is very less compared to the threat polar bears are facing because of climate change, and we are not having any mechanism so far to protect the polar bears. So that's all I have to say now. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer it. Thank
Thank
you.
you, sir, for your insightful presentation on the legal protection of polar region and polar bears. The floor is open for questions. So, what are the effective ways to implement the law to conserve them from both natural and anthropogenic causes? Could you segregate for our better understanding, sir?
Yes, and in fact, this 1972 convention is 1973 convention, considered to be one of the successful international efforts to protect the polar bears. Right. So, in that sense, not just this convention, under the in international environmental law regime, the treaty provisions especially, we say that there are few or couple of successful conventions. One such successful convention is this. So that is the first thing. And the strategies, or there are scientific strategies, and the two kinds of protection stated in the biodiversity convention, in situ and ex situ conservation. I mean, this polar bear is concerned, you need to have in situ conservation, and we have to improvise the in situ conservation, which is a very critical aspect, because it is very difficult to protect polar bears outside their habitat. So that is another concern. I hope that these things will be addressed, only by the circumpolar states who are members to the
Thank you. Thank you, sir. One more question, sir.
Yes.
Do you think is there any country which has effective laws to conserve polar bears as such?
See, I haven't studied them in detail, but as as I read for this presentation, or for the MOOCs course in general reading of the convention, I see there are two states mentioned here. I've got extensive provisions in terms of laws. One is Greenland through Denmark, the other one is Norway. And in terms of integrating with indigenous populations, I see that Canada is doing equally good. So this is what I would say.
Thank you, sir. We will read on that. Thank you so much for your insightful presentation, sir.
Thank
Our
you.
final speaker for today's webinar is Mr. S. Naveen, Assistant Professor, Department of Environmental Law and Legal Orders, the Tamil Nadu Dr. Ambedkar Law University, for sharing his valuable insights on role of Arctic Council in maintaining integrity of horticulture.
Okay. So, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're all.
Okay. So, thank you for conducting today's session, and I would like to take this chance to thank the previous two speakers, Dr. Rangesh and Dr. Shaktivel sir, for that great lecture. Dr. Rangesh sir spoke on the scientific aspects and the physiology of the polar bears to a great extent, which was really helpful in understanding for me. And thank you, Shaktivel sir, for giving a beautiful overview and analysis of all the legal aspects or the legal framework of the polar bear protection. So, following upon these two lectures, hopefully I will not take too much time, maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes, just to highlight the things which the other two speakers have not covered. So, just let me present my presentation.
Third
Okay, are
presentation.
you able to see it, Nandakumar, in full
Yes, sir, it
screen?
is clear, sir.
Naveen,
It is clear, sir.
Is it in full screen?
No, sir, it is not in full screen, but it is clear, sir.
Okay. So,
Yes, sir,
let's
it
start.
is full.
Yes, sorry about that. So, as we have seen the two lectures, previous lectures today, we saw the importance of the polar bears as a key species. So, every ecosystem or every particular place will have a key species. So, polar bear is one such species which is responsible for the entire balance of biodiversity in a particular region, which is the Arctic. And also due to the climate change and human activities, as we covered in the previous two sessions, polar bears have been pushed towards extinction little by little. And finally, we'll take a look at all the legal frameworks which the other two speakers uh, have not covered. So basically, when we are talking about the threats to the polar bears, we have climate change, and we have poaching and illegal trade, and we have pollution and habitat destruction. So these are the main reasons why polar bears have been pushed to such threatened or vulnerable category, and all these things were said by Rangesh sir. Approximately, there are around 22,000 to 31,000 polar bears worldwide at present, which are which are particularly contracted in five particular states or five particular countries. And majority of these polar bears are found in the Canadian part of the Arctic, around 60% to be exact, and the other 40% are spread throughout the other parts of the Arctic Council. And what the UNEP has said recently in January 2025, you could see the date and month here. It says that the Arctic region, the ice in the Arctic region has what it means is going forward by 2050 we are not even sure that there will be ice remaining left. And polar bears, as we all know, is the largest land-based predator, no, a land-based carnivore on Earth, and it needs a large area to live comfortably. And that exact no territory has been under constant threat due to climate change and extension of human activities. And what, as a result, what happened is the polar bears are coming into contact with human settlements. They have been seen rummaging into the human garbage. They have been seeing, they have been witnessed in human settlements or research centers. So there has been a human-animal conflict over there also in the Arctic region. And this is because polar bears are not able to find proper no sustenance. They are not able to find food. No, just imagine polar bears are basically carnivores. They need to hunt. So in order to hunt, they need a proper topography. They need to hide. They need to crouch before jumping on their prey and killing it. So imagine what would happen if the entire terrace or the entire terrain is plain, or the entire terrain is water. And a polar bear is a terrestrial animal. Though it can swim, it is an excellent swimmer. It hunts on land most of the time. So what happens here is, since the geographical or topographical advantage is lost, the polar bear has been no not hunting, has not been beneficial in that particular pursuit of hunting, and therefore it has to move towards more easier no alternatives. And that is what Sir Rangesh sir also said, it is an opportunistic feeder. So wherever it is able to find food nowadays, it is going and eating it, whatever is available. So much so that it has started to signs of eating its own kind, no cannibalism. So if you can see the center image over here, it's seen as holding a piece of meat, but in fact it's another polar bear's head. So what it shows here is, in order to evolve, or in order to adapt, in order to survive, the species itself is evolving to a great extent that it has started hunting and eating its own kind. So that is the severity, or that is the current plight of the polar bears nowadays. And okay, all these are all covered. Polar bears hunting are basically, we can categorize them into three types: legal hunting, which we can see in Canada, Greenland, and the Alaskan part of USA. So majority of the hunting is once again done in the Canadian part of the Arctic region, where in in a yearly 600 to 800 polar bears are being hunted by permits. So this is not covered under the federal law of Canada. It's left up to the provinces whether to give permits or to not give permits. So the certain provinces are giving permits to hunt these bears. And simultaneously in Greenland also they are given limited permits, not as much as Canada, in order to hunt the polar bear once again. But however, in US, as contradicting to the other Canada and Greenland, hunting rights are only given to the indigenous communities, particularly the Chukchi community, where they are on average, on an yearly basis, they hunt around 40 polar bears. That too, not using modern weaponry or not using any kind of machineries as such. They still hunt the polar bears using the traditional means. But however, when we look into Norway and Russia, polar bear hunting has been completely banned. Norway had banned it earlier, way before in 1973, 74, I think. And Russia, even though it has not explicitly banned it, it has also not explicitly given permits to hunt these polar bears. And apart from these kinds of no legal and prohibited hunting, there is also illegal hunting. which is done mainly in the, once again, in the Russian Arctic area, where on average per year 100 to 200 polar bears are being hunted for their coats and body parts, pelts and body parts. And the primary consumer of these particular parts or these particular products are the Chinese, just right below the Russian state. We have we have China. So the majority of exports, the majority consumer of these polar bear products are the Chinese once again. And apart from this, we also have climate-driven deaths and accidental self-defense kills of polar bears. So recently, I think last year, a vessel, commercial vessel which was going in the Arctic regions, witnessed four polar bear carcasses which was floating in the ocean, because they predicted that they were trying to swim a long distance and they were not able to complete that particular travel, and they were exhausted, and ultimately these four polar bears had to die, and two of those polar bears were cubs. And so you can see the visual no images here. So how the polar bears are supposed to be and how most polar bears are right now currently. They are malnourished, they don't have anything to eat, and they are literally dying out of starvation. And as Shakti are told, so due to climate change induced no topographical changes, they're not able to hunt. They are extraordinary hunters, but right now due to the topographical disadvantage, they're not able to hunt, these hunt for survival. And when we look into the international legal framework, all these were covered by so I'll just go a little bit into we have to cover here. So broadly, the objectives of CITES are threefold, which is to prevent overexploitation of species through international trade, ensuring that the trade is legal, sustainable, and traceable, and finally, to protect endangered species by regulating trade across borders. So this is the organization of CITES. The Conference of Parties meets once in every 2 to 3 years. We have a standing committee, which is the primary advisory and supervisory body, the secretariat, which is responsible for all the administration, guidance, and coordination of meetings. And finally, we have the scientific and technical committee, which are responsible for conducting research. And we have three annexures under CITES. So our Appendix 1 the animals under Appendix 1 is given strict protection because they are threatened with extinction, which means no such trade should be encouraged of these animals. There is a total ban on trade of these animals. For example, tiger, rhino, and also this includes put it in caps, polar bears. So any of these animals are not supposed to be traded across borders. And Appendix 2 includes regulated trade, meaning that they are not exactly threatened with extinction, but they are at risk. But however, they are traded with permits. For example, certain species of reptiles and mahogany trees are allowed to be traded across borders. And we have Appendix 3, which are protected within a particular country. So I've also given an example here where a walrus is protected by the Canadian legislation, and all those animals which are protected, severely protected by a particular country is listed in Appendix 3. I think we'll just skip this part because Sir elaborated this in detail. This is the 1973 Agreement on the Conservation of Polar Bears, and the important features of the agreement, or I think we all saw, which includes prohibition of hunting except for scientific purposes and for indigenous subsistence hunting and self-defense. And we have the habitat protection, which has to be ensured by the members or to the agreement, and also to limit industrial development and tourism in the area. And research has to be conducted on polar bears and has to be shared with other states, other stakeholders. And the cooperation between states is emphasized greatly with respect to transboundary matters. And finally, it also recognizes the right of indigenous people to hunt polar bears for their subsistence. And the outcome of this particular agreement outcome of this particular agreement was the Agreement on Conservation and Management of the Alaska Chokota Polar Bear Population 2000. This was a bilateral agreement which was made between US and Russia, in order to recognize the purpose of this agreement was twofold. Number one was to make sure that the polar bear population does not go extinct in these two regions, and number two, it also had the provisions to recognize the right of the particular indigenous communities in order to hunt the polar bears. Because if you look at both the Alaskan part and the Russian part, the communities of people belong to the same community. No, which is the earlier we saw the Chukota community. So since on one part, the Alaskan part, they are given permits, but on the Russian part, they are not given permits. So in order to address this particular contradiction, this agreement was made in the year 2000. And later we have the UNCLOS, which was once again discussed by Sir. So in that particular convention, we have Article 192 and 194, which talks about marine. 61 and 65, which talks about the conservation of living marine resources. And on the matters of sovereignty and jurisdiction, we have Articles 56 and 77, which grants coastal states the sovereign right over the EEZ, built under Article 56, and Article and the rights over the rights, in the sense the rights are given to the coastal states for the primary purpose or for the sole purpose of exploring, conserving, and managing natural resources over the EEZ and as well as the continental shelf. Now coming to the core area, the Arctic Council. So what exactly has the Arctic Council done in order to maintain the integrity of the Arctic region, thereby extending the protection to the polar bears? So basically an outline of the Arctic Council, it's an intergovernmental forum which is comprised of Canada, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Russia, Sweden, and USA. So it also includes many NGOs and international organizations, and there are permanent participants which comprises entirely of the indigenous communities of the Arctic. They are represented by these 6 permanent participants: the Aleut International Association, the Arctic Athabascan Council, the Greenwich Council International, Inuit Circumpolar Council, the Russian Association of Indigenous Peoples of the North, and the Sami Council. So these 6 communities, these 6 participants represent all the indigenous communities who are present in the Arctic region, and they what is their purpose in this Arctic Council is, in the sense, previously they were not given any proper recognition or they were not recognized. However, addressing this particular concern, the Arctic Council later on addressed this particular issue and added these 6 communities, these 6 participants into the permanent membership, gave them permanent membership, so that moving forward, all decisions have to be agreed and ratified by these 6 bodies also. Yes. So, what are the main initiatives of the Arctic Council? They primarily focus on environmental protection, sustainable development, and scientific research. And as an outcome, the main initiatives of the Arctic Council with respect to climate change mitigation is the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment. So, this was considered one of the most successful initiatives which was done by the Arctic Council. So its main purpose was to address or was to study the loss of sea ice. So when it comes to sea ice, a little bit technical here, so just bear with me. So sea ice in the Arctic, we can categorize them into 2 types: single year ice and multi-layer ice. So single year ice is formed in a particular season, and multi-layer ice is a permanent body of ice which is present there throughout the year. So single year ice is very important because these single year ice are also used as a hunting ground for the polar bears, and it is also used as a breeding ground for many other species, which migrate to this particular area in this particular season so that they can breed in this single year ice, which once again is the reason why this particular place is a hunting ground for the polar bears. So, the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment does a detailed analysis of all the direct and indirect impact of climate change in the Arctic region. And we also have a Black Carbon and Methane Reduction Council, which is a part of the Arctic Council. And we have the most important part here is the conservation of Arctic flora and fauna, CAF. So the Arctic Council, this is an Arctic Council working group which is focused on primarily protecting the biodiversity in the Arctic region. So as an outcome of the CAF's working, we have the circumpolar biodiversity monitoring program, initiative. And these are the other initiatives, though they are small initiatives. They, regardless, they have a special or they have a meaningful purpose, which is conducted by the Arctic Council. The Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program, which the purpose of which is to primarily assess the pollution levels due to anthropogenic activities in the Arctic region. The agreement on enhancing international Arctic scientific cooperation. We have the Sustainable Development Working Group and Ecosystem Based Management Council. And the achievements of the Arctic Council are these three achievements: the Arctic Marine Strategic Plan (AMSP), the Arctic Offshore Oil and Gas Guidelines, the Polar Bear Action Plan. And the challenges while we are speaking, no, why as even though we have an Arctic Council, we have a huge participation of these many member states. We have representation of indigenous communities. We have NGOs. We have international organizations who are all a part of the Arctic Council. But despite all these things, we have many challenges and we have many limitations. The primary limitation being most of these agreements or most of these documents are non-binding agreements, and therefore they are not able to enforce the contents of the documents properly. And the second aspect being the climate change. Despite all these efforts, despite the existence of the UNFCCC or the Paris Agreement or the many plethora of programs undertaken by different member states, climate change is still continuing at a rapid pace, at a very dangerous pace. So this particular aspect of climate change continues to pose a significant threat not only to the polar bears but to the entire Arctic region. And thirdly, the geopolitical tensions. Geopolitical tensions and the fourth reason can be interconnected here: growing trade routes and industries in the region. So, as we all know that due to the melting glaciers in the Arctic regions, new pathways are emerging, new trade routes are emerging in the Arctic region. So we have the northwest and northeast passages, which has been exploited by many logistics companies, many states, in order to gain access to other parts of the world very easily. It almost reduces the amount of traveling into half, especially from China to the European region. The amount of traveling has been reduced directly into half, and this is done at the cost of destroying the entire Arctic region, which is the livelihood or which is the home of the polar bears. So, in order to protect the polar bears, we have to undertake huge or no strict regulations, especially with respect to human anthropogenic activities in that particular region. Even within that, especially into the logistics part. Yes, so that is an important aspect which we have to focus on. And finally, last but not least, we have the food security and biodiversity concerns. As all these glaciers and ice is melting here, there is no food for not only for the polar bears but also for the indigenous communities also. And due to this particular problem, there have been instances of environmental refugees who have been migrating out of these Arctic region into interior parts of the mainland territories. And this is a serious cause of concern because the indigenous communities who are living there for centuries, thousands and thousands of years. They have come up with a way to cohabitate with the polar bears and other biodiversity of a particular region. So what we are doing here is we are essentially destroying an entire region, and we are forcing the people and animals to either die or to move out of the particular region. Where humans can survive in other regions, the biodiversity, especially the polar bear animals like polar bears, cannot survive in other regions than the Arctic. So you can also try to come up with a plan like you can remove the entire polar bear population from the Arctic and place them into Antarctic. This was a question which was asked by one of my students. But I don't think that will be possible because the compared to Arctic, the Antarctic climate conditions are very severe, and therefore there cannot be proper justification for that. And What can we do in order to address this particular problem here is we can try to strengthen international cooperation, not just for the namesake, but also in a proper regulatory or a proper strict manner. And we can enhance the legal frame enforcement mechanisms. We can implement climate change actions and habitat restoration programs, and we can expand research. And the last recommendation or future strategy is key or an important suggestion, no, which is engaging non-Arctic states. Nowadays, there are many states which are focused on what is going on in the Arctic region, because climate change is a phenomenon which not only affects the Arctic region. Through the Arctic and Antarctic region, it also affects the rest of the world. So, in order to protect the climate change, in order to not allow the climate temperature to increase, the non-Arctic states are also focused on protecting the Arctic region. And therefore, countries like India, even though they have an observer status in the Arctic region, that is not enough. So, non-Arctic states, through qualified means, must have some kind of a say, must have some kind of a vote in order to make sure that the voice of the non-Arctic states are reflected in the decisions of the Arctic Council. And I think that is all with respect to my presentation. If you have any doubts, you can just let me know.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your insightful presentations. I have few doubts, sir. The first one
Yes.
is, how does the Arctic Council facilitate the cooperation between Arctic and non-Arctic states? Sir?
I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear you. Can you speak a little bit louder?
Yeah, sir. How does the Arctic Council facilitate the cooperation between the Arctic and non-Arctic states?
Yes. So traditionally, if you look into the history, they have not done that. So previously, before even the Arctic Council was established, they had only claims in the Arctic region. So claims, as in the such, they claimed a particular region of Arctic as their own territory. I'm talking about the present Arctic Council states. The US, Denmark, Norway, Canada, and Russia, they all claimed a particular piece of the Arctic region. So what happened was, over a period of time, as human rights perspectives also developed parallelly, they had no other choice than to recognize firstly the rights of indigenous people who were living there. So that is how the six no permanent committees for indigenous people were created. And following suit, due to the growing, they allowed certain states to be observers in the Arctic Council. So currently, how it stands is here is there are certain countries who have the status of observer, including India, South Korea, and China. So they are only limited to the status of observer, as in they are allowed to sit in the proceedings, they are allowed to witness the proceedings, but they are not allowed to take any decisions which reflect or which has an impact in the Arctic region. And which is a very, very dreadful position for us currently, because as the Arctic region is going more and more weaker, or is going, the structural integrity of the Arctic is going more and more weaker, or it is getting destroyed, the chances of reviving it becomes very less. And there are companies which use this particular phrase as a marketing strategy, and they are encouraging tourism in that particular region, which no saying that this is going to be a lost territory sooner. This is going to be a lost landscape in the future. So come and see it before it is entirely lost. So that is the current plight of the Arctic region, and as such, tourism as recently has been increasing significantly in that particular region. And though many countries are opposed to this, they don't have the say, just because they are not part of the permanent decision-making body of the Arctic Council. And fortunately, this has not happened in the other end of the world, in the Antarctic, where the entire claims for the Antarctic have been frozen through the Antarctic Treaty. And through the treaty, it has declared that the entire Antarctic region can be utilized only for peaceful purposes. That does not mean that there are no geopolitical tensions in the Antarctic. Even over there, they have fought wars for these claims. But however, due to the existing legal framework and due to the existing negotiations between countries, we have managed to strike a particular balance. And moreover, penetrating into the Antarctic region is very, very difficult as compared to the Arctic region, because Arctic region the ice is very flimsy, or the ice is very thin as compared to the Antarctic, and therefore the trade prospects in the Antarctic region is not viable currently. However, the trade options in the Arctic region is a blooming sector right now, and that is all the more reason why we need to stop, or why we need to have serious regulations, or at least we must enforce some kind of indirect soft law principles, like having renewable energy for at least for the ships which traverse in the Arctic waters. I think that is a good place to start.
Thank you, sir. It was clear. One more question, sir. How does the council balance the economic interests, such as oil explorations, with indigenous rights and environment protection? Since one end of the world is talking about the climate change, the other end of the world is fighting for the resources. What's your views?
Yes. So once again, we have to dive into the geopoliticals, the geopolitics. As we all know, the entire valuation of dollar is based on oil. So based on that primary fact, that we can assume that unless and until we come away from valuation of, or the equivalence between oil and dollar is calculated, there are no future prospects of coming outside of the particular sector, which is the oil sector. And the more the oil sector is blooming, the more powerful the dollar becomes. And therefore, being a superpower and being superpowers who rely on the valuation of dollar so that their entire economy does not collapse, there are no immediate scenarios where we can witness that oil extraction or energy industry, especially in the Arctic, around the Arctic region, to be decreasing anytime soon. And more so ever than before, they are actually proposing to increase efforts in order to extract more oil and energy around the Arctic region. And this was not the case previously before, due to the existence of ice. So that is why again and again we have to emphasize on mitigating the climate change efforts. It's a more or less like a vicious cycle. In order to protect the glaciers, you have to reduce the industrialization around those regions. In order to reduce industrialization around these regions, you have to reduce the trade aspects. In order to reduce the trade aspects, people must consume less. So in order to people must consume less, they must rely on less energy. So it's like a continuous vicious cycle which is happening again and again. So in order to break this cycle, we have to introduce more stringent policies. Uh, but while that is not enough, that is a good place to start. But the real change will only come when the individual people, like what Sir told, stop wasting energy in general,
Yes, long.
and promote more cleaner and more sustainable energy as a alternative.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, sir,
Yes,
Sham here.
yes.
Sir, I have question regarding that. Why there is a contradiction regarding legalizing the hunting of polar bear? Like in Canada, they are allowing the hunting of polar bears by, especially by the indigenous communities, with some restrictions. In some other country, they are fully not allowing the regarding the hunting of polar bears, sir. So why there is contradictions?
In Canada, they don't have any regulations for indigenous people alone. They allow almost all people of the northern provinces to hunt the polar bears. But however, in the US, especially in the Alaskan part of the US, they grant permission to particular indigenous communities to hunt polar bears. So they give permits to those people. But in the Russian part or the Norwegian country, they don't give any kind of permits. In fact, in these Norway, they have banned, as I told you earlier, they have banned hunting of polar bears in 1973 through their laws, national legislations. And Russia, however, Russia has the largest Antarctic coast, meaning that Russia occupies the larger part of the Antarctic. So it's a vast area which has to be regulated by law. And as you know, since the Arctic region of the Russia is large and vast, the chances of illegal poaching is also larger. And in order to address this, the national government has to bring in some certain policies, which they have not done till now. And basically, it all comes down to the culture of the people. In some of seals, because it has been a part of their culture, it has been a part of their tradition, which allows them to do so. So those countries cannot explicitly ban them because they're part of the culture. So similar to what we faced here in Jellicate, and over these countries, it is a part of their culture, hunting whales or hunting seals. And now, even though polar bear hunting is not explicitly a tradition of any of the mainland areas, the indigenous communities hunt these polar bears as a part of their culture. So you cannot exactly, it's morally wrong, but it's not legally prohibited. So that is how I can put it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, for your thought-provoking session. And I would like to call upon Ms. Ethel Jovita for both of us.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, as we come to the conclusion of this insightful and inspiring webinar on polar bears, it is my honor and privilege to extend a heartfelt thanks to all those who participated in this event. First and foremost, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to our Honorable Vice-Chancellor, Professor Dr. S. Santhoshkumar sir, our Registrar, Professor Dr. GOWRI Ramesh ma'am, our Dean, Professor Dr. V. Balaji sir, for letting us organize this event. And I would also like to give our deepest gratitude and thanks to our convener, Professor Dr. Haritha Devi ma'am, HOD of Department of Environmental Law and Legal Order, for helping us to conduct this webinar in a short notice. Thank you, ma'am. I would like to express my deepest gratitude to our esteemed speakers, Dr. P. Shaktivel sir, for his insight on legal protection of polar regions and polar bears, which helps us to understand the Arctic countries' rules, regulations, and the framework which are available to protect and conserve the endangered species. Your presentation gives us immense understanding about the laws of the Arctic nations. Thank you, sir. We would also like to thank Dr. K.Rangesh sir for his expertise knowledge on polar bear, its lifestyle, anatomy, and recent development of polar bears. Your insights have not only enlightened us but have also inspired us to take meaningful steps towards protecting these magnificent creatures and their fragile habitat. Your insight on solution to protect the polar bears are immeasurable. Thank you, sir. And our esteemed faculty, Mr. S. Naveen sir, thank you for sharing your invaluable knowledge and expertise on polar bear conservation, the impacts of climate change, and the need for global action. Thank you, sir. I would also like to acknowledge and thank our faculty mentors, Assistant Professors Mr. S. Kadaravan sir and Mr. Assis Stanley sir for their efforts and support which have ensured for the smooth execution of this event. Lastly, my heartfelt thanks to all the participants for their active participation and the student coordinators who have organized this event. So, as we conclude, let us carry forward the knowledge and inspiration which we have gained today and continue to work towards a bright future. Thank you.
Sir, Shaktivel sir and Rangesh sir, thank you
Yes, sir.
for giving us your time today.
Thank you so much,
And
sir. Thank you for the wonderful opportunity to speak in front of you.
I wish to collaborate and work with you in the future once again if time permits.
Yes, sir. Definitely, we will make it in future, sir. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So, Shaktivel sir, thank you, sir. So you can leave, sir. Rangesh sir, you can
Yes,
leave.
yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Correct. 1 hour 59 minutes 40 seconds.